Good morning, the YouTubes. Here, we got to do this. We'll just say hi to everybody. Say hi, everybody. Hi. Hi, everybody. The Hebrews and the Shalomi homies. And the people are like, Bear, I want to hang out with you. How do I do that? How do you do that?
Go on a mission.
You go on a mission. GrindstoneMinistries.com. And it's not like, I don't say that to be a facetious a-hole. It's just a fact. I don't go out into the world unless it's to go help these people or because these people are here helping me. Like, that's pretty much how it works. So, although random bear sightings do occur, it's interesting when they do. So, we are in Luke 22 this morning, page 1014 in the scriptures. And this is a long chapter, so I'm going to do my best to cruise. And I don't particularly like this chapter. I don't like any of these chapters in any of the Gospels because it all leads up to the crucifixion of Yeshua, and I don't like that at all. Because every time I read that, it just hits me again and again and again with the sacrifice that was made on my behalf. And so, yeah, just trying to be a good steward of my Messiah's blood and not abuse the grace of it. So, all right. Luke 22, and the festival of Matzah drew near, which is called Pesach, or Pesach, if you don't know how to read Hebrew, like I did or didn't know for the first however many years. This was the first word that I got like internet Hebrew correction on. They're like, no, dude, that's Pesach. I'm like, there's no k in it. They're like, no, that's Pesach. Or Passover, okay? And the festival of Matzah drew near, which is called Pesach, or the Passover. And the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to kill him, how to kill Yeshua, for they feared the people. They knew they wanted to kill Yeshua. They didn't know how to do it because they didn't want backlash from the people. And Satan entered into Yehuda, into Judas, who was called man from Kerioth, Judas Iscariot, who was numbered among the 12, one of the 12 disciples. And he went and spoke with the chief priests and captains how he might deliver him, how he might deliver Yeshua up. And they were glad and agreed to give him silver. And he promised and was seeking an occasion to deliver him up to them away from the crowd. You know how much silver? Anybody? 30 pieces of silver. At least it's not loud back there. 30 pieces of silver. And the day of unleavened bread came when the Pesach had to be slaughtered. So, just to be clear, we made it this far. We've talked about matzah, Pesach, unleavened bread, and Pesach. We're in verse 7. What book are we in? Luke. Luke is where? The New Testament. And they're about to do the what?
Passover.
The Passover. Okay, just tracking. They're about to do the Passover. Yeshua and his most dear Hebrews and Shalomi homies are about to do the Passover. So yet again, the idea that this was all done away with, and even the argument, well, that was before the crucifixion. Acts 2, and they were all in one place in one accord on the day of Shavuot. We do these things. Okay. And he, Yeshua, sent Peter and John, saying, go and prepare the Passover for us to eat. And they said to him, where do you wish us to prepare? And Yeshua said to them, see, as you enter into the city, a man shall meet you carrying a jar of water. Follow him into the house he enters. And you shall say to the master of the house, the teacher says to you, where is the guest room where I might eat the Passover with my taught ones? And he shall show you a large furnished upper room. Prepare it there. I've often wondered if they had a Hebrew intel network, because it almost sounds like to me like you're going to see a guy holding a jar of water. It's like you'll see a man holding a newspaper with a brown hat, and that's your guy. They're like, I don't know if, obviously there's some ordination here and prearrangement by the Father, but it also seems a little intelligence operative-y. You know what I mean? Like, you'll see a guy wearing a 5'11" cap with a morale patch, and that's your guy. And because that happens repeatedly throughout the Gospels, like you'll go see this guy and he'll have this thing and tell him the master sent you. I'm like, copy that. I don't know. It just tickles my brain every time I see those things. And going, they found it as Yeshua had said to them, and they prepared the Passover. And when the hour had come, he sat down and the 12 emissaries with him. And he said to them, with desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before my suffering. Basically, I have been looking forward to this with you guys. For I say to you, I shall certainly not eat of it again until it is filled in the reign of heaven, the reign of Elohim. And taking the cup, giving thanks, he said, take this and divide it among yourselves. For I say to you, I shall certainly not drink of the fruit of the vine until the reign of Elohim comes. So he didn't drink it. Right? He passed the cup around, they drank it. You know, the blood and the bread and the wine, the blood and the body, right? This is not the first time that we actually see this in the Bible. This is in Proverbs, actually. Proverbs 9, which, once again, Yeshua knew his word. And we see this played out over and over again, that he was very well versed with the word, very well studied with the word, and he embodied it, right? Matthew 5:17, he embodied the Torah and the prophets. So he knew it intimately. As stated yesterday, I also have reason to believe, me speaking, not the Bible, that up to this point, Yeshua was under a Nazirite vow. So yet again, he didn't drink the wine. Same reason when he's on the cross, when he tastes the bitter wine, he spits it out. And we see lots of other people in the Bible who do tremendous things on behalf of the kingdom were under a Nazirite vow. John the Baptist, Samson, Elijah, Paul, the Apostle Paul, perhaps Yeshua. There's no definitive evidence where he says, yes, I took a Nazirite vow, but the way that he behaves in a lot of instances leads me to believe, based upon Numbers 6, that he may have been under a Nazirite vow at the time. That's purely speculation on my behalf. That's not biblical. But I find it very interesting. And so we can actually flip to Proverbs 9:5 right quick, because why not? And that is page 737, which is a plane made by Boeing, which might be bankrupt by the time this video airs because of the coronavirus. So we'll see. 9:5. Well, we'll just start at 9. Wisdom has built her house, and she has hewn out of it 7 columns. 7 is the number of what? Anybody know? Spiritual perfection. Okay? Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out of it 7 columns. She has slaughtered her meat. She has mixed her wine. She has also prepared her table. She has sent out her young women. She cries out from the highest places of the city, who is simple? Let him turn and hear. As for him who lacks heart, she says to him, come eat of my bread and drink of the wine that I have mixed. Leave the simple ones and live, and walk in the way of understanding. Walk in the way of understanding. 1 Peter 2:21, for this you were called, that you would walk in the footsteps of Messiah, that in him there was no sin and no deceit was found in his mouth. Cool. The way. What is the way? It's the same thing that Paul speaks of in Acts 24:14. They're like, hey bro, who are you? It's like, bro, I'm Saul from Tarsus. Like, what are you doing? He says, I believe in the way, which they call a sect. So just interesting how the words all kind of back each other up, right? So this concept of come and eat of the bread and drink of the wine that I have mixed, leave the simple ones and live, and walk in the way of understanding. I feel that Yeshua was aware of the connotation of this. And there's a lot represented in the bread and the wine, right? The body and the blood. We can go deep into that, and we're not going to, because Luke 22 is an extremely long chapter. But there's biblical precedent for this outside of what we're experiencing here in Luke 22. Once again, showing a connection between the Old Testament and the New, showing that Yeshua was aware of these things and had deeply internalized these things, and that he was really a master of symbolism. He understood when he did these things, and the people that he was with understood in context when he said, hey, bread and wine, they got it. Walk in the way of understanding, that is related to bread and wine, right? And leave the simple ones. There's an element of separation or sanctification there. So, verse 19, back in Luke 22. And taking bread, giving thanks, he broke it and gave it to them to eat, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, the cup also after supper, saying, this cup is the renewed covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. I can't hear the words renewed covenant and not go to Hebrews 8. And so we're going to go to Hebrews 8. There's going to be a little bit of flipping this morning. I'm sorry, guys. I'll give you page numbers. So Hebrews 8 is page 1172 in the scriptures. And I've read this 20 times on camera, and I'll read it 100 more if we need to. But starting at Hebrews 8, verse 6. But now he, Yeshua, has obtained a more excellent service, inasmuch as he is also mediator of a better covenant, which was constituted on better promises. Now, if you were to just stop right there, you go, see? Aha! But of course, we read things in context. For if that first covenant had been found faultless, then no place would have been sought for a second. For finding fault with them, he says, Yahuwah says, so the fault of the first covenant was with them. Them is us. Them is Israel. We are adulterous whores that do whatever we want to do, not what we are told to do. Which, Phelps, last night you were literally like, I don't even know why you wear those tassel things. That's because in Numbers 15:37 we're commanded to, because it's a physical reminder to not go after the whoring of our own eyes, but to do the Father's commands. And it also serves as Hebrew IFF, because if I see somebody else with a couple of tassels swinging when they're walking, I'm like, that guy, I got to talk to him. And I've actually had that happen to me a few times. And so that's why we wear them, so that we remember and do. Literally the command in Numbers 15, verse 37. Remember and do. And so Israel did not remember, Israel did not do. For finding fault with them, he says, the days are coming, says Yahuwah, when I shall conclude with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah a renewed covenant. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Mitzrayim. See, the Old Testament, all that's done away with. Wait a minute. Because they did not continue in my covenant, they didn't do it, and I disregarded them, says Yahuwah. Because this is the covenant that I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yah, giving my laws in their mind, and I shall write them on their hearts. And I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. So the condition of this new covenant under Yeshua as mediator, literally what's referred to by the writer of Hebrews as a better covenant, is that we will have Yah's laws in our mind and written on our hearts. And I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And they shall by no means teach each one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, know Yahuwah, because they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. Because I shall forgive their unrighteousness, and their sins and their lawlessness I shall no longer remember. Now, all of that is straight up out of Jeremiah 31. Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34. The last part of Hebrews 8 can be a terrible stumbling block. By saying renewed, he has made the first old. Now what becomes old and growing aged is near disappearing. Why? Why is that near disappearing? Because Israel did not continue in that covenant in the first place. Literally, the renewed covenant, the reason that blood was shed, literally, the argument in Hebrews 8 for what the renewed covenant is that if we have Yeshua as the mediator between us and the Father, he'll establish a new covenant that our half of the deal is that his laws are on our mind and written on our hearts. And then he will be our Elohim, we will be his people, and Yah will remember our sins and our lawlessness no more. Sins and lawlessness are the same thing, FYI. 1 John 3:4, he who does sin does lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. So they're the same thing. So, for this, that blood was shed, will be shed, to bring us to this, to return us back to the Father and his laws. And there's probably a greater overarching conversation to have there, that the Torah is not the cornerstone of the Christian faith. It is an integral part of my faith. And I had faith in Jesus, in my Redeemer, my Messiah, way before I ever knew that I was supposed to keep the Torah. And because of that faith, when everything in my spiritual world was crumbling, my church was falling apart, my wife was an unbeliever, I had no friends outside of the church, I had nothing left but a firm belief in my Creator and a relationship with this Son and this Bible. And I just slammed my face into this Bible over and over and over again and read it for myself and started seeing things like Matthew 5:17. I came not to destroy the Torah of the prophets, for surely, truly, truly I say unto you, until heaven and earth passes away. Well, wait a minute. I'm on earth. This has not passed away. Till heaven and earth pass away, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass away from the Torah till all be done. WTF, bro? Nobody taught me that. Matthew 7:21. Master, Master, we cast out demons in your name. We prophesied in your name. We did many mighty works in your name. And truly I will say unto you, depart from me, you who work lawlessness, for I never knew you. What the hell? And then I started reading Hebrews, and I was like, wait a minute. There's a lot more here than this two-line concept of a renewed covenant. And that's why I try and read things in context with y'all, because the context matters. It's just like the idea that, oh, well, it's not what goes into a man's mouth that defiles him, but what comes out. We can eat whatever the hell we want. Yeah, if you read those two verses, if you read everything around it, you realize, oh, that's about ritual hand washing. That has nothing to do with what you're eating. Well, what about Peter's vision? Peter, take and eat. That's about accepting that Roman guard that comes to his house, because Peter had an issue of only hanging out with Yehudim, only hanging out with the Hebrews. He wanted nothing to do with the Gentiles. So the Father had to show him that vision so that when the Gentiles showed up at his door, immediately after that vision, he would have that frame of mind to accept that guy in, because that guy needed his help. Nowhere in there does it say, hey, Leviticus 11 has been done away with. Right? Because context matters. So, anyway, back to Luke 20, or 22, verse 20. And if I go too far down any rabbit holes, somebody throw something at me. Yes, please throw that knife at me, the face region. All right. Back to 20. Likewise, the cup also after supper, saying, this is the cup of the renewed covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. But see, the hand of him delivering me up is with me on the table. He knew. Of course, he knew. I mean, even, obviously, he was the son of Elohim, but even if he wasn't, you'd know. Because people act differently, right? Like if there were 12 of us sitting at this table, and one of them was, a transgressor and sinned against us and given us up, we'd know. Their body language would be off, right? For indeed the son of Adam goes as it has been decreed, but woe to that man by whom he is delivered up. And they began to ask among themselves which of them it could be who was about to do this. And there also took place a dispute among them as to which of them seemed to be greater. And he, Yeshua, said to them, the sovereigns of the nations rule over them, and those who control them are called workers of good. But not so with you. But let him who is greatest among you be as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves. For who is greater, the one who sits at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who sits at the table? But I am in your midst as the one who serves. There's a teaching here that could easily go into servant leadership. Servant leadership is good on the face, but deeply dangerous if you go too far with it. But the point is, humble yourselves. It does not matter what your position in the kingdom is, right? We are to serve one another. We are to serve the kingdom. Literally, the protocol here is serve the Father first, serve your fellow man, and then everything is training. Like that is literally the daily operational protocol of Grindstone. We are to be in service to one another. It does not matter, well, Mike's been on 5 deployments with Grindstone and Ashton's only been on 2. Doesn't matter. Right? I mean, you better come to more. But there's none of that. Right? It's not about who is the greatest and who is the least. We're here. We have a mission to accomplish. Yeshua, this was like some of the last intimate moments that he had with them. And he's like, you guys are squabbling over which one you use the best. It's like, to me, it's like, you're all POSs. We're all POSs. None of us is better than anybody else. And if you think about it in context of what we're doing here, they had a mission to accomplish. Their leadership was going away. It's like, guys, get your heads in the game, right? It's not about who's better and who's worse, who's greater and who's lesser. Do your job. So, but you are those who have remained with me in my trials, and I covenant for you as my Father covenanted for me, a reign, to eat and drink at my table, in my reign, in my kingdom, and to sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. There's a whole deeper teaching in that as well, but he's extending the kingdom to them and the authority of the kingdom to them. I covenant for you as my Father covenanted for me. And by the way, a covenant is simply an agreement between 2 or more parties. So I'm making an agreement with y'all as my Father made an agreement with me, right? To sit on the thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Leadership. And the master said, Simon, Simon, see, Satan has asked for you to sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you that your belief should not fail. And when you have turned, strengthen your brothers. I think that's interesting because there's clearly an implication of warfare here. Satan wanted Simon Peter, and Yeshua was like, nope, he's mine. But Simon, now I need you to get your shit together because your brothers need you, right? And so Simon is like, and he said to him, I am prepared to go with you, both to prison and to death. And Yeshua said, I say to you, Peter, the cock shall not crow at all today until you have denied me 3 times that you know me. And he said to them, when I sent you without purse and bag and sandals, did you lack any? And they said, none at all. And he said to them, Yeshua, but now let him who has a purse take it, and likewise also a bag, and let him who has no sword sell his garment and buy one. We actually had a teaching on this at church about the change in EDC that was instituted by Yeshua. Because at first as these guys went out, he was like, you don't need anything. Go with what you got, it'll be okay. Then it changed. He's like, times are getting a little rough. I'm about to be delivered up. Bring your purse with you. Make sure your sandals are squared away. If you don't have a sword, you're going to need one. Right? Which I think everybody here has a sword on their hip. So I don't have a purse, though. I thought about bringing my purse. I didn't bring my purse. I didn't want to be judged by the internet. It's a sweet purse, though. It's Gucci. It's multicam, but it's a purse. I had Cody make it for me. Is that my purse? That's a man bag, sir? Dude, there's a pistol and 2 reloads and a tourniquet and shears and whatever. Shut up.
Careful, I need a bunch of purses.
That's fine. We'll sell them off on the internet for grindstone. So. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Verse 37. For I say to you that what has been written and yet to be accomplished in me, and he was reckoned with the lawless ones, for that which refers to me has an end too. So that whole he was reckoned with lawless ones is Isaiah 53. Guess where we're turning? Isaiah 53. Which is page 456. And I'm going to read the whole thing because we can. Isaiah, I believe, is the most quoted prophet by Messiah. Yeshua was very aware of Isaiah, and Isaiah spoke a hell of a lot about Yeshua. I wonder what they talk about upstairs now. You know, it's like, dude, I've been waiting for you. I wrote this whole 66-book thing about you. What's up, you know? Isaiah 53. Who has believed our report, and to whom was the arm of Yahuwah revealed? For he grew up before him as a tender plant. This is all prophesying of Yeshua. As a tender plant and as a root out of the dry ground. He has no form or splendor that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should desire him. Despised and rejected by men, a man of pains and knowing sickness, and as one from whom the face is hidden, being despised, and we did not consider him. Truly, he has borne our sicknesses and carried our pains, yet we reckoned him smitten, stricken by Elohim, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our crookedness. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. We all, like sheep, went astray. Each one of us has turned to his own way, and Yahuwah has laid on him the crookedness of us all. He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, but he did not open his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, but he did not open his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And as for his generation, who considered that he shall be cut off from the land of the living? For the transgression of my people he was stricken. That's an interesting phrase. For the transgression of my people he was stricken. The implication being, be Yah's people. And he was appointed a burial site with the wrong, and with the rich at his death, Joseph of Arimathea, because he had done no violence, nor was deceit in his mouth, which is quoted in 1 Peter 2:21. In him there was no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. For this you were called to walk in his footsteps, because in him there was no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth. But Yahuwah was pleased to crush him. He laid sickness on him, that when he made himself an offering for guilt, he would see a seed, he would prolong his days, and the pleasure of Yahuwah prosper in his hand. He would see the result of the suffering of his life and be satisfied. Through his knowledge, my righteous servant makes many righteous, and he bears their crookedness. What is righteousness?
Walking blamelessly in all the commands.
Thank you, brother. Through his knowledge, my righteous servant makes many righteous, and he bears their crookedness. Therefore, I give him a portion among the great, and he divides the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his being unto death, and he was counted with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. So that's Yeshua for us unto righteousness. And again, getting back to Yeshua understood the Torah and the prophets and embodied it and was well versed in it, he drops a one-liner in the midst of his table of men, and they get it. Because that one-liner embodies that entire chapter in Isaiah, which is why we read the entire chapter in Isaiah, because again, context matters. So back to Luke 22:37. For I say to you that what has been written has yet to be accomplished in me, and he was reckoned with the lawless ones. For that which refers to me has an end too. He's like, look, that was written about me, boom, one-liner, they get it. And they said, Master, look, here are 2 swords. I got 2 Glocks. Let's do this thing. But he said to them, that's enough. And coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives according to usage, and his taught ones also followed him. So let's see. This is perhaps the last flipping we're going to do. And coming out, he went to the Mount of Olives according to usage, and his taught ones also followed him. Zechariah 14, verse 4, which is somewhere toward the front of your Bible-ish, about a third of the way through. Maybe 40% through. Yeah, maybe 40% through. 14 verse 4. So Yeshua just gets done telling his guys, yo, I'm going to be delivered up. I'm pleased to eat this Passover with you. Here is the bread and the wine, my blood and my body. Here's a reference to Isaiah. I'm going to be crucified and take on the sins of the world and die for the transgressions and lead people unto righteousness. And then he goes to the Mount of Olives. So Zechariah 14 verse 4. Well, actually, we'll just start at 1. See, what? 643, page 643 in the scriptures. Thank you, brother. See, a day shall come for Yahuwah, and your spoil shall be divided in your midst. And I shall gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. And the city shall be taken, the houses plundered, and the women ravaged. Half of the city shall go into exile, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. And Yahuwah shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and on the Mount of Olives shall be split in 2 from the east to the west, a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it to the south. And as we read yesterday, immediately after that we get into the prophecy of Messiah ben David. Messiah. So Yeshua just gets done talking about, hey man, I'm about to be delivered up and I'm going to die for the sins of the world. I think I'll go stand on the Mount of Olives now. He got it. He knew it. He knew what he was doing. And by simply leading by example and his people following in his footsteps, they got it too. Oh, he's on the Mount of Olives now. It's about to get real, right? And there's so much context in this book. Like, I've talked about it before, but my number 2 character trait is context. Like, if I don't understand how all the pieces fit together, I'm lost. And to see how brilliantly Yeshua does these things, whether led by the Spirit, and these things came out of his mouth and he was moved to be in these places as a fulfillment of prophecy, and or he embodied it so perfectly that he just inherently understood and then did these things. I don't know. But it continues to support and prove that he was the Mashiach, that he was and is the Messiah. Does that make sense? Okay. You didn't throw anything at me that time, so I figured I was good. Okay. And coming back in Luke 22, verse 40, and coming to the place, he said to them, pray that you do not enter into trial. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and falling on his knees, he was praying, saying, Father, if it be your counsel, remove this cup from me. Yet not my desire, but let yours be done. And there appeared a messenger, an angel from heaven to him, strengthening him. And being in agony, he was praying more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. I can't even imagine. And rising up from prayer and coming to his taught ones, he found them sleeping from grief. And he said to them, "Why do you sleep? Rise and pray, lest you enter into trial." And while he was speaking, see a crowd. This giant crowd shows up. And he who was called Yehuda, Judas, one of the 12, was going before them and came near to Yeshua to kiss him on the cheek, I'm sure. And Yeshua said to him, "Judas, do you deliver up the son of Adam with a kiss?" And those around him, seeing what was about to take place, said to Yeshua, "Master, shall we strike with this sword? Is it time?" Right? Let's roll. Plate carriers? Right? Do we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. Does anybody know who that was?
One of you guys that can't hit the plate.
I believe it was Peter. Thank you. Cut off his right ear. But Yeshua answering said, "Allow it this far." And touching his ear, he healed him. That's kind of a big deal. Like, oh, you cut his ear off? Hold on, give me that. My bad. Hold on. Hang still, buddy. All right, got it. There you go. I wonder if it was like if he had that white coat, you know, that guy, the Be Healed guy, or he was just Be Healed the ear. I don't know. Touching his ear, he healed him. And Yeshua said to those who had come against him, the chief priests and captains of the set-apart place, captains of the temple, and the elders, "Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs?" He's like, overreact much, you know? "While I was with you daily in the set-apart place in the temple, you did not lay hands on me, but this is your hour and the authority of darkness." And having seized him, they led him and brought him to the house of the high priest. And Peter was following at a distance. He basically called him out. He's like, "You saw me daily in the temple, and you didn't have the balls to come get me in the temple. You got to come out as, you know, as if, you know, we're a band of robbers with, you know, swords and clubs in the middle of the night." Copy. And when they had lit a fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. And a certain servant girl, seeing him as he sat by the fire, looked intently at him and said, "And this one was with him." But he, Peter, denied Yeshua, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And after a little while another saw him and said, "You are one of them too." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And about an hour later, another insisted, saying, "Truly, this one was with him too, for he is a Galilean too." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are saying." And immediately, while he was still speaking, a cock crowed. And the master turned and looked at Peter. Could you imagine? And Peter remembered the word of the master, how he had said to him, "Before a cock crows, you shall deny me 3 times." And Peter went out and wept bitterly. Yeah. I can't even imagine. That look, dude. But think about it. Peter had to get squared away. Yeshua told him, "Hey, Satan's been fighting over you." I told Satan, "No, he's mine. But you need to get your poop in a group because your brothers need you." And I bet you, after that pep talk at the Passover and then that look, that was it, right? That was the moment. I don't know that biblically, but I would imagine here that was the thing. It was like, I'm done. Never again. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. And the men who were holding Yeshua were mocking him, beating him, and having blindfolded him, they were striking him on the face, and were asking him, saying, "Prophesy, who is it that struck you?" That would piss me off. And they said to him much more, blaspheming. And when it became day, the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, came together, and they led him into their council, saying, "If you are the Messiah, say it to us." And he said to them, If I say to you, you would not believe it at all. And if I asked you, you would not answer me at all. From now on, the son of Adam shall sit on the right hand of the power of Elohim. And they all said, "Are you then the son of Elohim?" And he said to them, "You say that I am." And they said, "Why do we need further witness? For we have heard it ourselves from his mouth." And that is the end of Luke 22. We talked yesterday about the abomination of hanging Yeshua on a stake and what the Pharisees were, scribes, chief priests, were trying to accomplish when they did that. Even to this day, the whole thing just makes me sick because they got it so wrong, even with Yeshua in their very midst. Right now, he didn't make it easy for him. Every time he saw him, he was calling them out. But they could have. There were those that did come to him, right? There were many that came to him. There were many more after he was crucified and resurrected and visited the early church. There were many, many more that came after that. But it amazes me the humanity of people. It's like if Yeshua was right there preaching, and you're like, "Man, I don't know about this guy. I don't know." I just think about that look that Peter got. Soul crushing. I don't know. It makes me think like, what are you not doing that you should be doing? You know? We're going to end with that. Shalom, YouTube.